What's up guys, it's Nick here and now I'm back with another audio video, another edition of Londrick's Fave 5, and this week's topic is going to be NXT Takeovers. So we're going to go for a more recent one really. Obviously there are some positives in wrestling these days. NXT is one of them. I mean, over the last few years we've seen several exciting takeovers. I've enjoyed the vast majority of them, so we're going to rank them top 5. Before we go, obviously, I just want to mention, any NXT fans, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but Takeover Brooklyn 4 is coming up the night before SummerSlam, and obviously with their tapings the other night. I know the entire card, and let me tell you, it's going to be an exciting one, it really is, so keep your eye for that. I promise you, if you're an NXT fan, you're going to love the next Takeover. But before we do the top 5, let's get a handful of honourable mentions out the way. These are ones that almost made the cut but not quite. Takeover Our Revolution, December 2014, almost made the cut. Takeover Orlando, WrestleMania 33 weekend, that one came pretty close, but not quite. I mean, well, that was a really excellent takeover, but not quite on this list. Takeover London, that was another honourable mention. But enough honourable mentions, let's go to the top 5. Number 5, we kick off with a fairly recent one. We go back to last November, Survivor Series 2017 weekend. Takeover War Games. So yeah, I think for me, this was really, I think, the start of this next era of NXT. I think there was a great 2014, great 2015 era. Then obviously 2016 started off hot, but then obviously when WWE did the draft, obviously NXT was a massive victim of that, and most of the roster got pillaged from it. And I feel like there was a rebuilding period from 2016 into 2017 where NXT was still very good, but not quite as good as it used to be. And I think it wasn't up until around this time that the new wave of NXT really came through. And I think that's the most common theme I get from this show, that this was a building block for new stars. I mean, you had Lars Sullivan in his first takeover, taking Cassius Ohno in a decent enough opener. I feel maybe the most memorable match, maybe not the best, but Aleister Black versus the Velveteen Dream. I mean, that was an awesome match, I feel. That was definitely a breakout performance from the Velveteen Dream, who's now one of the hottest stars on the brand, and we'll see what the future holds for him. And obviously this match kind of helped Aleister Black go towards the NXT title. What else is on this card? Oh, the Fatal 4-Way for the women's title, to get the title that Asuka vacated. Kairi Sane, Ember Moon, Nikki Cross, and it was one of the Iconics. I think it was Peyton Royce, but I'm not 100% certain about that. That was a decent enough match, obviously, with Ember Moon finally become the NXT Women's Champion. Then we had two great main events, like I say, another star-making performance. Andrade Cien Almas beat Drew McIntyre to become the NXT Champion, which that one really came out of left field a little bit, because obviously Almas had only been put with Zelina Vega about 4 or 5 months earlier, was regularly in the opening match spot on takeovers and things like that. And then he got this big chance and he became the NXT champion. He was an awesome NXT champion. And this obviously with the bicep injury proved to be Drew's last NXT match, because he didn't return until after WrestleMania, and he debuted on the main roster, so he never came back to NXT. And for me, what makes this NXT, obviously I love the main event, obviously. Big War Games, love that gimmick match. WWE brought it back, kind of. I mean, yeah, it was War Games, it wasn't quite the same, there was a lot of differences. But you had a Undisputed Era versus Sanity versus Authors of Pain and Roderick Strong. But I'll give the guys a credit, they took this concept and kind of made it into the new era of such an exciting match. For me, it's probably one of my top 5 favourite NXT matches ever. It was my WWE/NXT match of 2017. Absolutely loved that match. And yeah, there's a lot of love for this show, really is. I think a lot of people might have slept on it because the last few takeovers have been really good. But honestly, if you've forgotten about this takeover, go on the network, go back and watch it. It's really is worth it. Coming at number 4, we're going back a little bit to February 2015, an NXT Takeover rival. I mean, for me, from about our evolution to the first Brooklyn, this is my favourite ever period of NXT. So you look back and just the talent roster, I think this show really brings it out. The level of talent they had during this time was pretty unbelievable. I mean, I think they are starting to get there now with a great roster, but I think the roster had back then was incredible. I mean, I think it was a great time for the brand as well. I feel like obviously the network had came out in 2014. About a year earlier was Takeover Arrival, which got a lot of buzz. I feel like with the added exposure of being on the network, this is when NXT really grew as a brand. I mean, by all accounts, NXT was still pretty great in 2013, but obviously not being on the WWE network and all that, they just didn't have the awareness. And obviously after the success of Arrival, live specials became a thing. The first takeover happened, I think, of May of 2014. Then every quarter they'd have a takeover, and they started gaining momentum. And then they had this one, which was the best one yet. I mean, up and down, just a fantastic card of wrestling. I mean, you had Hideo Itami taking on Tyler Breeze, a pretty sweet opener. You had Blake and Murphy taking on the Lucha Dragons for the NXT Tag Team titles. I mean, that's kind of interesting looking back, seeing how Buddy Murphy's done on 205 Live. Finn Balor, Adrian Neville, probably one of the most underrated takeover matches ever, in my opinion. Probably one of the most forgotten gems. This was just an awesome match. It was quite early in Balor's run. This was his second takeover, and obviously this was Neville's last takeover, as he went to the main roster after WrestleMania 31, after having a long, fantastic run as NXT champion throughout 2014. But yeah, this match is awesome, actually. I mean, definitely worth tracking down if you haven't seen it. And then one of the main matches of the night for the NXT Women's title, the Four Horsemen Women Fatal 4-Way, Charlotte versus Sasha Banks versus Bayley versus Becky Lynch. It's kind of interesting looking at it now, looking at where all the women went after this. Don't think it was intended to be a big match at the time. I think it was kind of a filler match, but they really had a fantastic match. And this is where Sasha Banks won the NXT Women's title, so that's great. Then the main event, first ever WWE match between Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Now, of course, Kevin Steen and El Generico had many matches in Ring of Honor, PWG, etc. But this was a new thing for them in WWE. Obviously, Sami Zayn had been there since 2013. For me, was the man in 2014 for NXT. Had a fantastic year. I mean, but a lot of people might not remember it now, but obviously I feel like Sami Zayn then is pretty much what Johnny Gargano is now. That underdog babyface that the fans get behind, and the people just like him. I mean, the fans really just like Sami Zayn. He had that babyface fire, and obviously, for me, Sami Zayn's road to becoming the NXT champion was probably one of my favourite storylines in NXT history. Then obviously Kevin Steen was signed to the company, debuted at our Evolution, beating some dude named CJ Parker. Wonder whatever happened to that CJ Parker guy. He kind of looks a bit like Juice Robinson, doesn't he? Just saying. Then obviously at the end of the night they had the big turn where Owens turned on Zayn, and then obviously led this title match. And they had just Kevin Owens batter the shit out of Sami Zayn, beat Sami Zayn up to the point where the referee had to stop the match. That was just fantastic booking, and Kevin Owens could not have got off to a better start on NXT. His match was fantastic. This whole show is fantastic. So if you want to be watching NXT for a year, 2 years, and you missed out on this era of NXT, I definitely recommend you check this takeover out. Coming in number 3, and we're sticking with NXT. Obviously this year, takeover's going back to the Barclays Centre for the 4th time in a row. But the first time they did it was 3 years ago in 2015. For NXT Takeover Brooklyn 1. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I think for me, my favourite period ever of NXT was our evolution to this show. Just at that time in NXT was just so hot. There was so much buzz about the brand. I mean, granted, because WWE was sucking at the same time, so I think a lot of people were getting to NXT, but they were building a fantastic roster, young guys and indie veterans, and it was a nice mix. It really was. I mean, I think one of the big gets around this time was Samoa Joe. Obviously, Finn Balor had come into his own, become the NXT champion. The women just got hotter and hotter. But yeah, for me, obviously, what people need to remember, obviously, I think it's taken for granted now that every Big Four pay-per-view, and usually one either the May or the June pay-per-view, the night before they get usually in the same arena, except for WrestleMania, of course. And I think obviously when except for in San Antonio, the NXT Takeover has a live special in that same arena, usually a 10 to 20,000 arena, whatever the case may be. And obviously I think it's taken for granted, yeah, NXT either going to sell it out or they're going to have a respectable number, not embarrass themselves. In 2015, that was really up for debate. I mean, this was a big risk at the time, because obviously Triple H had built the NXT brand for a while, and obviously as far as TV and live specials, stuck in the Full Sail arena, just, you know what I mean, that Full Sail crowd and all that, stayed there. I mean, slowly but surely started touring house shows, but at the end of the day they were touring in the smaller venues and all that. Obviously the brand was grown, no doubt about that. Triple H decided he was going to put on a takeover the night before SummerSlam at the Barclays Centre. So it was really questionable if NXT were going to sell this out. I mean, could have went the other way. They could have sold 2, 3, 4, 5,000 tickets, had the arena about a third full, and it'd be looking embarrassing for them. But no, they actually pulled it off. And I feel like this was a vital show in the history of NXT. I mean, it showed people in WWE that NXT could draw crowds, could draw interest, and obviously after that, I think the next time they did before Big Four was Takeover Dallas, which was the night before WrestleMania 32. Then therefore after that, going to it before a Big Four pay-per-view was a regular thing. But if this show hadn't been successful, that probably wouldn't have happened. And to give Triple H's credit, he gave out an incredible card for this one. For me, this kind of felt like an NXT version of WrestleMania. Obviously not the same scale, before I get daft comments. I'm just comparing them to the importance of and all that. This felt like a big culmination of a big building period. I mean, I think obviously big matches were had here, storylines were ended, big things started. I mean, obviously the opener, I mean, it cracks me up to see how random this was and how cool it was. Tyler Breeze versus Jushin Thunder Liger. That's right, Jushin Thunder Liger wrestled in a WWE show in 2015. On paper, that just sounds so random as fuck, but it happened, and it was pretty damn sweet as well. And bear in mind, he was still active member of the New Japan roster at the time as well. So it's the only time since the days of Vince Senior that WWE and New Japan had worked together in some capacity. What else was on the show? Quite obviously looking back now, weird because kind of they didn't really go anywhere. But the Vaudevillains had an NXT title win over Blake and Murphy. I mean, to this day, I argue that should have been Enzo and Cass. I mean, Enzo and Cass are so over in NXT. It was in Brooklyn. And to be honest, the Vaudevillains were always just so average to me. Never really got the Vaudevillains, was never really that into them. And then obviously, Baron Corbin had his first big match against Samoa Joe. Now, this wasn't a great match by any means, but it was one of the first matches where Baron Corbin looked like he could be a decent wrestler. And it was one of the first times Samoa Joe really stood out in NXT. And obviously, things just got bigger and better for Joe after that as he went on to feud with Finn Balor, become the NXT champion, which, don't worry, that's going to come up in a little bit. And obviously then the two big matches, Bayley Sasha Banks, the NXT Women's title. Do you really want me to put this match over any more than it already has been? Sure, most people have seen this match. It is the best women's match in mainstream wrestling history. I say that because there probably was better matches in like All Japan Women in the 90s and stuff, but as far as mainstream pro wrestling like WWE, WCW or whatever, this is it. I mean, this match was amazing. And it's just sad now looking back what's happened to Bayley and Sasha on the main roster, particularly Bayley. I mean, obviously, the feud they have now is just, you know, it's stupid. It's just not working, obviously. And they did so much things to screw up Bayley's character, and obviously Sasha, in a few brief glimpses, has had success on the main roster, but obviously been significantly overshadowed by Charlotte, and she had a bad booking and all that. But let's rewind to 2015. Sasha Banks was the boss. She was this awesome bitchy heel, a great character. Bayley was the ultimate babyface underdog, loved by the kids, loved by the NXT universe. And this match was just magic, it really was. The build-up, the storyline, the storytelling, and obviously the moment with Bayley finally getting a day in the sun, where she finally beat Sasha Banks to become the NXT Women's Championship after a long chase. And obviously the other three, Sasha, Becky and Charlotte, went onto the main roster and then Bayley had another year on NXT. Obviously the end of the four horsewomen in the ring celebrating together. Just a fantastic moment, and still probably Fave 5 NXT matches. There's an idea in my head. We may do that in the future. This would be on there, it really would. I mean, I just love this match. It's really awesome. Then obviously main event, NXT title ladder match, Finn Balor versus Kevin Owens. This felt like a huge match on the NXT scale at the time. Obviously, Kevin Owens, for me, as brief as his time was in NXT, probably one of the best signees to NXT ever. Kevin Owens did a fantastic job on NXT. And as far as main roster, yeah, he's had some hiccups, but I think for the most part has been very good. Probably one of the better NXT call-ups, in fact. And Finn Balor at the time was just starting his huge run on top as NXT champion, as the face of the brand, the longest reigning NXT champion in history. Obviously with the Demon character and all that. And Finn's main roster run hasn't been as great. Obviously, the whole thing at the SummerSlam 2016, winning the Universal title but getting injured was a massive setback. I just don't think he's ever really recovered. This match was great as well. Not an awesome match or anything like that. I think there's been better takeover main events and stuff like that, but this is a great match in its own right, with Finn Balor going over to retain the NXT title. So if you definitely haven't seen this show before, check it out. NXT Takeover Brooklyn 1, August 2015. Now, coming at number 2, these two shows are as good as any WWE pay-per-view you'll ever see, as good as any New Japan show you'll ever see. These are 10 out of 10 shows for me, and that's quite rare for me to do, although in fairness over the last 5 years I've done it more than I did in the previous 20. But anyway, so Takeover Dallas, April 2016, 2 nights before WrestleMania 32. Yeah, this is obviously with the WrestleMania season. A lot of wrestling fans are back into the product. You've obviously WrestleMania weekend's taken on a life of its own the last few years. I mean, pretty much every indie promotion out there has a big show on the weekend of WrestleMania 30, on the WrestleMania weekend. And the reason for that being, it's pretty easy to sell, because obviously you got thousands and thousands of wrestling fans in town for WrestleMania, and they want to have the full experience. So if you're an indie promotion, you do a live show, you're going to draw crowds there, because they're just here to get as much wrestling fix as they can. And NXT got on the act in 2016, and boy did they deliver. I mean if the WrestleMania, after this show, I thought WrestleMania 32 just did not have a chance. This show was just from top to bottom, absolutely top notch. Just so much talented people in there, and just so many fantastic matches. Just so much came together. I mean, it was the end of the road for some guys, and other guys it was just the beginning. So obviously kicked off with an awesome match between Revival and American Alpha. And it's just so depressing now watching Revivals work in NXT and what they became on the main roster, because if you've only seen Revival on the main roster, you guys just have no idea how good these guys really are. I mean, on ability, for me, they're the best tag team in the world. But of course, since moving to Raw, it's just been, ugh. Now, granted, some of that was out of WWE's control, because obviously both Wilder and Dawson both suffered injuries in 2017. But since he came back, it's just been bad. And I just hold out hope it'll get better. Because obviously I do love these guys, I really do. And obviously American Alpha, Chad Gable, Jason Jordan was such a hot as fuck babyface tag team at the time. And they were somewhat successful on SmackDown. I mean, they were the SmackDown tag team champions. But they definitely weren't over like they were in NXT. And then of course, split them up. Because they decided Jason Jordan was going to be Kurt Angle's son now. And that hasn't really gone well, and obviously Chad Gable teamed with Shelton Benjamin for a bit, and his Raw run's been something of a disaster, so who knows? They're all the same brand. Maybe they'll put American Alpha back together at some point, and maybe we'll get to see these teams on the main roster, because they had a tremendous rivalry in 2016, and you had Baron Corbin versus Austin Aries, which was the only not so good match of the night. Wasn't terrible by any means, just painfully average. I mean, gotta be honest, Austin Aries' WWE run's gotta be considered a disappointment, all things considered. He had his moments, sure. I mean, you had that awesome match with Nakamura in Takeover the End, where I think his WrestleMania 33 pre-show match with Neville was really good. But apart from that, not a lot to shout about, really. And this is because obviously this was Aries' in-ring debut. However, unfortunately for Aries, Nakamura was debuting on the same NXT, and that just overshadowed everything. And the match was not so good, obviously, in this show. Obviously best remembered for the classic Nakamura versus Zayn. Up until recently, which we'll get into, this was the best match ever in NXT. Obviously, there was so much hype and buzz around Nakamura's debut. Nakamura being one of the top stars in New Japan for a long time. And obviously Japanese star as well, so not like a American star in Japan, a full-blown Japanese superstar, coming to the WWE, going up against, like I say, Sami Zayn, which I said before. Sami Zayn was awesome in NXT. For me, Sami Zayn's probably my favourite NXT superstar ever. I mean, that 3-year run he had in NXT was just outstanding. The matches with Cesaro, especially the Takeover rival match, the chase towards the NXT title, the feud with Neville, being betrayed by Kevin Owens, being put on the shelf. And this was Zayn's last match on NXT, as he had debuted in the main roster not too long before this. And it was even on WrestleMania 32, 2 nights later. So, in Zayn's last NXT match, in Nakamura's first, they put on a clinic. This is just unreal match. One of the few times Nakamura really shined in WWE. I mean, for the most part, I mean, he's had some great matches on the NXT and the main roster, sure, but it definitely not looked like the Nakamura he was in New Japan for the most part. This was one of those few times it just went balls to the walls. Amazing match. If you haven't seen this match, definitely check it out. It's one of the best matches ever in WWE. Then after that we had Asuka versus Bayley for the NXT Women's title. Another fantastic match, obviously with most of the Force Horsewomen gone. Bayley was left on NXT to kind of carry the women's division. And then along came Asuka, the star from Japan, formerly known as Kana. Came to the WWE as Asuka, was on this amazing streak. Obviously Asuka was undefeated in her entire time in NXT. She was presented as a killer, she came across as a killer. And again, like the Revival, it's just so sad to see what's happened to her. And it looked like she was on the right track as well when she started undefeated on the main roster of Raw for several months, winning the Royal Rumble and facing Charlotte at WrestleMania, and then she lost, which wasn't too mad about at the time, because obviously streaks are meant to be broken. She did lose to Charlotte of all people, but then after that, the move to SmackDown, the feud with Carmella, and after Asuka's just done on the main roster. Hope I'm wrong, hope she could turn it around, but for me, her aura's gone now. She's no longer special, she's just another women's wrestler. So this is an awesome feud at the time as well. I'm really excited for this. And Asuka, beat Bayley clean by tap out, which shows top babyface can lose clean, and if it's right, it'll get over. I mean, obviously, yeah, you just make a note of that. Then obviously main event, Finn Balor, Samoa Joe for the NXT title. This felt like a huge match as well. For me, the Balor-Joe rivalry is one of the biggest rivalries in NXT history. Obviously, Balor had been the NXT champion for a long time at this point. Samoa Joe, I don't want to say too much, but I love Samoa Joe. Massive Samoa Joe mark. Obviously, NXT run really helped bring the old Samoa Joe back, you know. The killer, the badass, the fucking beast. Not the unmotivated slob that he was at times at TNA, especially over the last 2 or 3 years of his run there. And the real Samoa Joe had come back, obviously. I think the London match was the best one that they had out of the 3. And I feel like, this match would have been a classic if Joe hadn't have bled so early on and the referee kept interrupting him to try and clean the blood up. I mean, I understand why they'd have to do things like that because of PG and all that, but I just felt the flow of the match kept getting interrupted because of that. And for me, my stance is, okay, no blood, so no bleeding, that's fine, got no problem with that. But if it happens during the match, especially on the network, like not on free television or whatever, just let it happen, And I feel like if they just let it happen and let Joe bleed and all that, I feel like the match would have been better, and obviously Balor goes over to take the NXT title. And that night, I thought to myself, that's it, NXT's peaked. It ain't going to get any better than this. I feel like this was a pinnacle. This was obviously the best. For me, I felt once this show's over, right, this is the best NXT show I'm ever going to see. Well, I was wrong about that, wasn't I? 2 years after Dallas, it was topped. Coming in at number 1, new Takeover New Orleans from WrestleMania 34 weekend. This show, wow. This show is amazing. This is one of the best wrestling shows I've ever seen in my life. And I've been a wrestling fan for 26 years, so yeah, if you haven't seen this show, you need to check it out. Even if you're not really an NXT fan, I would suggest you watch this show from top to bottom. An unbelievable card, just really was. The night before WrestleMania, the NXT boys blew WrestleMania 34 out of the water, obviously, and it kicked off in style with the North American Championship ladder match. Adam Cole, Ricochet, EC3, Velveteen Dream, Lars Sullivan and Killian Dane. This was an introduction of a brand new title, and what a way to start it off. I mean, what a ladder match. I mean, this match was just unbelievable. One of the best ladder matches in the past, definitely the past 5 to 10 years for sure, absolutely. There's probably been better ladder matches than this, like in the past, but for the last 10 years or so, this may well be the best. And I'm going to say, for me, obviously, easily the best opening match in the history of NXT. And for that matter, with the exception of Bret and Owen at WrestleMania 10, I'll probably say the best opening match in WWE history. I mean, some of the spots were just unbelievable. The action never stopped. Everyone looked good and played the roles well. Obviously, with Sullivan and Dane being the power guys, Velveteen Dream doing his stuff. Ricochet, that fucking spot where Ricochet was falling backwards off the ladder, but he landed feet first on the top rope, did an Asai moonsault. If I hadn't have seen that, I'd have told you that was probably physically impossible to pull off. But Ricochet pulled it off. Then Adam Cole, of course, took the North American title, which he still holds today. So, awesome opener. You had Shayna Baszler versus Ember Moon. And that was a really good, aggressive match. I mean, I feel like Shayna Baszler's come on a lot over the last few months. Obviously, when she first got on the main roster, she was green as shit. Because she's only wrestled a handful of matches, but she had 1 mic skills, 2 believability and physical presence. So if you had those things, you could train her as a worker later. She was obviously a former MMA fighter, part of Ronda Rousey's 4 Horsewomen. So obviously Ember Moon had been on NXT for a while. A very capable wrestler. I mean, obviously I think she got a great match out of Shayna Baszler. Although ironically, I think Shayna Baszler's best match so far was the one with Toni Storm at NXT UK a few weeks ago. This match was great, and obviously Shayna Baszler took the NXT Women's title there. Then we got an interesting match. Pete Dunne and Roderick Strong versus the Undisputed Era for both the NXT Tag Team titles and the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. And this match wasn't as great as everything else in the card, but it served a great purpose, which obviously looking now, genius move really, obviously. And then obviously Roderick Strong turning on Pete Dunne, join the Undisputed Era. I say great move now because I feel like Roderick Strong has just made the Undisputed Era so much better. I mean, I've said it in a few videos, but I want to say it here. I feel like Strong and O'Reilly are making a far better tag team than O'Reilly and Fish. Really do believe that. I mean, some of the Undisputed Era's match with Mustache Mountain, fantastic. The match I had with Birch and Lorcan to take over Chicago, fantastic. I mean, if you haven't seen the match between Undisputed Era and Mustache Mountain from NXT last week, that was one of the best regular NXT TV matches you'll ever see. Awesome match. Obviously, this turned Pete Dunne babyface. And then obviously the last 2 matches, Aleister Black, Andrade and Almas for the NXT title. Another fantastic match. Obviously, Almas for me had a fantastic run as NXT champion. Maybe top 5 NXT champions, I'm not sure. But obviously, win the title from McIntyre. Also feuded Johnny Gargano, in particular the Takeover Philadelphia match. Which Takeover Philadelphia was a good show, but I don't think it was a great or amazing show. This match, obviously, Aleister Black had been built up for an entire year. Debuting in Orlando, the WrestleMania 33 weekend before. It only tasted 1 pinfall loss, and that was in the Fatal 4-Way match, and that was because of outside interference. So Aleister Black then defeated Andrade St. Almas to become the NXT champion in a fantastic match. It really was. But the main event, Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, unsanctioned fight. This, for me, is the best match in NXT history. If it wasn't for Okada or Omega at Dominion, it would be the best match in wrestling for 2018, period. I mean, so think about that. It's better than any New Japan match, with the exception of Okada versus Omega 4. Just the story in this one's incredible, obviously. For me, Gargano Ciampa is probably the best feud NXT's ever put on. And obviously it's still ongoing. This issue is not settled. This feud is continuing. And who knows when it's going to go, when it's going to end. But it's been an awesome ride so far. And obviously DIY together, one of the awesome tag teams in NXT. Takeover Chicago last year. He was turned on. Gargano was turned on by Ciampa. Ciampa got injured. Obviously Gargano went on a losing streak, built himself back up to the point he was on the verge of becoming NXT champion, but he lost to Andrade and Almas, and Gargano came back, Ciampa came back, to attack Gargano, and shit was on. And obviously Gargano put his career up against Ciampa's, Almas' NXT title. Ciampa cost Gargano the title, cost him his NXT career. They obviously did a thing where Gargano was stalking Ciampa for ages and ages, coming to his house and stuff like that, calling him up with messages. Then finally he had one last chance. If he beat her, Ciampa would get his job back. And obviously, because they were worried about what they were going to do, it was an unsanctioned fight. This was amazing. When I talk about storytelling, this is what I mean. Watch this match. Storytelling was absolutely off the hook in this one. Just an amazing match, it really was. I mean, I'm sure most people watching have seen it, but if you haven't seen it, go to the network, watch Takeover New Orleans, watch this match, or just find this match wherever you can find it. This match really is something special, and that's all I can say about it, really. So, that wraps up another edition of Londrick's Fave 5s. Not sure what the topic's going to be next week. Like I said before, any suggestions, put them in the comment section below. And obviously, first 2 weeks of August are going to be SummerSlam related. And until next time, guys, peace.